Today we're rounding up all of the RX 5700 XT video cards that we've reviewed so far, condensing the most important information into a single content piece to help you select the right version of the 5700 XT for your build. We'll be looking at the best all around, the best PCB, best cooling, and concluding with a breakdown of choices at each price point. Links will be in the description below if you want to pick up one of the cards. And we're recapping cards like the Sapphire Pulse and Nitro Plus, Power Color Red Devil, MSI Gaming X, Gigabyte Gaming OC, XFX Thick, MSI Evoke, and Reference. So let's get started with that. Before that, this video is brought to you by Thermaltake's C360 DDC Hard Tubing Water Cooling Kit. If you're ready to dip your toes into the water and build your first open loop cooling system, the Thermaltake C360 DDC Hard Tubing Kit comes with all of the components you need. The kit includes a 360mm radiator, 3 120 ARGB fans, a copper W4 ARGB water block for the CPU, a pump and res DDC combo, and all the fittings needed to build a full CPU open loop. Learn more at the link in the description below. We've worked with almost 10 5700 XTs so far, getting close to it anyway, and never did get my free sandwich from punching all those review 5700 XT cards, but hopefully AMD will follow through with that. Actually, I'd prefer they don't. Probably won't be good after being in the mail from Texas. So the cards. There are two versions of the reference PCB that AMD made, and this isn't discussed very much, but a lot of the early cards that came out for the 5700 series did have a version of the reference PCB. And actually talking with one of the other board partners, they only got one version of the reference PCB, and that was the blower card, where it's got a large unused section of PCB, and then it's got a point where the board partner can add in a BIOS switch if they wanted to, if they noticed it, or if they got the reference PCB for the blower card. The other version is the one that you've seen on things like the Sapphire Pulse and the MSI Evoke OC. They had a shorter version of reference. It was still an AMD designed reference board, and that's how they were able to get to market on time. Whereas the more custom PCBs like the Nitro Plus or the Asus Strix, for example, those took a bit more time to get to market. So those are the types of PCBs you're looking at. It's one of two for reference with some modifications, maybe the MOSFET choice changes, for example, and then there's the higher end custom models that came out later. Some of them are just side grades though of baseline reference, because baseline reference was so good when AMD put it together that a lot of these were not really upgrades over that. So we're gonna be looking at all these cards. We have categories like most unique feature, best, worst 5700 XT. We have a pricing breakdown and a bit more to help with selection of the card. Let's get through it. We'll start with the best overall. Our best overall category is a combination of everything. We're looking for something that's able to accomplish a lot without increasing its price from MSRP too much. And following that, it has to have good cooling, particularly noise normalized, and it needs to have a default VBIOS fan curve that is neither too weak nor too aggressive. We'll further be considering card compatibility and form factor for easier fitment in the widest range of cases. So this category is asking for a lot. It's easiest to be the best, you would hope, by being the most expensive for cooling, but we're looking for the balance of price and performance. Best overall goes to what is admittedly one of the least glamorous cards in the 5700 XT family, and that's the Gigabyte RX 5700 XE Gaming OC. Gigabyte barely defeated the Sapphire Pulse for this victory, and the Pulse would be our second choice if the Gaming OC isn't in stock where you live or is maybe overpriced at your retailer. The Gaming OC doesn't attempt anything extraordinary, but that's why it deserves this spot on the list. The Gaming OC, with its fairly standard cooler design and 3 fans, its standard height PCB, and a $420 average selling price, manages to have some of the best overall thermals across the stack. If we pop up the 40 dBA GDDR6 thermal chart on the screen, you'll see that the Gigabyte 190W VBIOS managed the best G6 thermals behind the more expensive Sapphire Nitro Plus and the Power Color Red Devil, besting nearly every other card in the hierarchy for this test. When we took the Gigabyte Gaming OC apart, we found a standard cooling solution. Gigabyte uses top-down oriented fins, a standard fin density, and aluminum contact plates for the VRM components and G6 modules. Gigabyte used thin thermal pads for better conduction by minimizing the intermediary interfaces. It made these effective by getting good mounting pressure on both the die and the memory module simultaneously. And this is a point that other cards, like the MSI Evoke OC, have struggled with for this generation. Separately, we very much appreciate that Gigabyte was among the only manufacturers, or maybe the only one thus far, which did not have a warranty void if removed sticker on the screws for the card. We strongly support the right to repair and believe that users shouldn't be subtly dissuaded from attempting to maintain their own hardware. Sometimes reducing e-waste and saving money is as simple as applying new thermal paste or new thermal pads, and that shouldn't be discouraged, especially because replacing a fan is relatively simple, but for some people, they would consider that violating a warranty. Gigabyte gets a major shout out for this, and other manufacturers should 100% take note. We'll give you a shout out if you do it too. GPU thermals were good on the OC, but we'll have plenty of opportunities to look at those in more depth for the rest of this content. For the best overall, we're giving it to Gigabyte for executing a standard, versatile, effective design that fits a reasonable price point of about $420. Link in the description below, along with all the others if you're interested in it. Best cooling is a tough category because this is the one that we care the most about when we're reviewing. Options here primarily include the Nitro Plus and the Power Color Red Devil. We no longer care about price at this point. These two trade blows in different categories of thermal and acoustic performance. To define best cooling, we have to consider a few aspects of what that means. One, noise-normalized thermals will allow us to establish the most efficient cooler design without allowing them to get a lead over the other one simply by having the fastest or the loudest fans. Two, autothermals will allow us to determine whether a cooler is well optimized for acoustics and thermals under the stock vBIOS fan curves. And three, acoustic testing allows us to look for issues like coil whine or whiny fans. We had coil whine issues with the MSI Gaming X at lower RPMs where the fan didn't drown out the coil whine. Now that said, that might be partially luck of the draw as well, so no guarantees on that. Thermally, the 40 dBA normalized results for the GPU temperature have the Power Color Red Devil technically at the top of the chart, but only thanks to the silent vBIOS and its 180 watt power target. The Nitro Plus lurks immediately behind it, only 2 degrees warmer in junction and edge thermals, and runs 20 watts more power through the GPU. That's impressive cooling performance, especially considering it's flanked on either side by 180 watt and 190 watt vBIOSes, including the Taichi X. The Red Devil strikes back at 220 watts, now normalized to the same power consumption as the Sapphire Nitro Plus at 220 watts. For these two, the results are within 2 to 3 degrees of each other, but Power Color holds a technical lead. It's 1 for 1. For GDDR6 thermals, the Nitro Plus leads everyone else on the chart with its 200 watt vBIOS solution when normalized to 40 dBA. That alone is a feat, particularly with how warm G6 runs, and the 180 watt Red Devil sits behind it. Although the extra power isn't going into the memory, it is going into the GPU that's immediately adjacent to the memory. Heat spreads quickly when you're considering that a PCB is made largely of copper. The Nitro Plus at 220 watts performs within 3 degrees of the Red Devil at 180, but also manages to outperform the Red Devil at 220 watts, now equalized by about 2 degrees. VRM MOS thermals are equal between them, although MOS thermals are also irrelevant at this level of performance anyway. For auto GPU thermals, the Red Devil appears toward the top with its Furmark auto profile, but this is not a fair comparison, and more on that in the Red Devil review. But the Red Devil actually runs a much lower fan RPM when in gaming scenarios. For us, it was about 1340, 1360 RPM when maintaining its GPU target temperature in our test bench, and it ramps harder than the others do in Furmark exclusively, where everyone else on this chart is remaining at the same fan RPM under the same conditions as you'd see in 3D Mark. Ignoring this 300 to 400 RPM boost it gets in Furmark, and instead looking at the more accurately programmed actual auto profile, the Red Devil falls down far on the charts, hitting 89 degrees junction for 220 watts and 94 degrees for 180 watts. Note though that this isn't a measure of which cooler is best, that'd be for noise normalized results, but rather a measure of who sets the more aggressive fan profile with vBIOS with some mixture of efficiency built in. The Nitro also has a limp auto profile, but one which manages better thermal performance than the Red Devil, and we don't consider the ones chart topping here to really count since they're just running faster fans. So we'd recommend one of these two cards, but set a custom fan curve for it, and you'll have one of the best performing 5700 XTs that you can get. The auto vBIOS isn't particularly impressive for either. It's mostly acceptable, but you can get a lot better by setting a custom fan speed, and these are objectively the most efficient coolers that we worked with. Ultimately, we'll give the award for best cooling evenly to both and waffle between them, as some of the differences are nearing error, not quite, but they're close, and manufacturing tolerance will introduce enough uncertainty that we can't call a hard winner between them. That said, both are very good, and you should just pick based on the price, the size, and what's available where you live if you're going for a high-end card. Most decidedly average is next. This, admittedly, is not much of an honor, seeing as it's basically us saying you should buy one of the other more exciting cards instead. But we still like to include the somewhat tongue-in-cheek mentions like this one in our roundup content. Besides, not being the worst is still a pretty big honor by our standards, to be fair. So MSI's RX 5700 XT Gaming X gets the most decidedly average award. It almost won the award for most X's in a name, but unfortunately for MSI, the XFX RX 5700 XT Thick 2 Ultra won that category. The Gaming X wasn't particularly impressive in any one category. Its cooling performance wasn't as good as the Nitro or the Red Devil when considering the whole picture, like G6 and GPU thermals versus power budget, and MSI didn't have enough time between the Evoke OC launch and the Gaming X launch to fix the thermal pad issue. The Gaming X manages better G6 thermals than the Evoke OC thanks to the upgraded base plate and the thermal pads on the back plate, but still only halfway covers the top two modules, and the center, where the die is located, still isn't covered. MSI's addition of thermal pads to the backplate did assist in pulling heat away from G6 memory better than the Evoke OC could. It's just that there's still a lot of thermal performance left on the table. The lack of ancillary features like dual V BIOS also brings an expensive card, like the Gaming X, down in the ranks, and so sadly, it's merely average against the impressive Nitro Plus and Red Devil. That doesn't mean it's bad, mind you, just that there's a lot more room for improvement. So it's not an objectively bad cooler or card, it's just very unexciting. Most unique feature is next. Differentiating one card from the next is difficult once already narrowed in on one particular GPU. The most obvious way to do this is the cooling solution, maybe the price. But even there, once you're fighting over single-digit deltas at the top end of a chart, it stops mattering as much which one is chosen, because you're already down to a point where it's hardly noticeable for normal use. Extra features like vBIOS switches or DMM probe points, software like the Sapphire Tricks utility TriXX, and other bonuses become smaller points that may sway a purchase for some users. For this, we'll give notice to the ASRock Taichi X. Don't get us wrong, the Taichi X isn't really able to justify its price for most people. It's encroaching on 2070 Super territory at $470 to $480. But it does have one bonus feature that may add value for some users, and it's not the RGB LEDs, and most certainly not the pretty okay but not amazing cooling performance. The Taichi X can support 6 display outs natively. This can be done with hubs, and we don't work enough with enough monitors to know the minutiae here, but from some preliminary research, it minimally reduced some additional cost on other hardware and instead reallocate it partially into the GPU. You might be able to cut down on some small latency in areas, but feel free to let us know about the advantages in the comments if you're someone who works with this many displays regularly. Beyond the 6 display native support, there's not much special about the Taichi X, but there's also not really much particularly wrong except for the price. Its cooling solution struggles to handle the 230 watt vBIOS at lower noise levels, but can be made to work or can be switched to the lower power vBIOS to work better. Everything is workable if you really want that display compatibility, and we'll also note that as the newest GPU or video card board partner of everyone on this list, ASRock has come out of the gate with a strong showing, even if it's not really a price we can justify for the card that you get, except for maybe in that 6 display scenario. As we enter the last few categories and the pricing breakdown, we must now talk about the best worst, the most impressively bad card of the series. We always give a best worst award in these roundups every year as we start considering parts carefully for our annual disappointment build, which is one of the greatest achievements that any PC manufacturer can be a part of. This time, we have 3 considerations. It's a battle between the MSI Evoke OC, blighted for its memory cooling solution, if you can call it that, the XFX RX 5700 XT Thick 2 Ultra, which does have the upside of having the most X's in its name, and the AMD reference card. Now that said, on the point of the most X's in the name, MSI did promise us via Twitter that it would launch a card named the XX Gaming Destroyer XX. So XFX had better watch out. We'd like to see an XFX RX 5700 XT XX Gaming Destroyer XX to ensure that they hold a victory for the most X's. So anyway, we'll strike the AMD reference card from the list straight away. Its cooling solution is undeniably the worst, period. Worse still than the Evoke or the Thick, which by comparison would be much better choices, but the reference card has some usefulness yet. The reference card is useful for its comparatively good PCB and VRM solution, as mixed with a cheap card that has easily sourceable water blocks. At $400, if you're buying this to water cool, you can't really get a better deal with the 5700 XT. We'll also remove the MSI Evoke OC. It made some egregious mistakes, but the card can be made better without too much effort, and MSI is sort of doing an RMA process if you really have an issue with the G6 memory. And we didn't really like it, but there's a worse one yet. We issued videos for both the MSI Evoke OC and the XFX Thick, wherein we attempted to fix the cards and found success in improving both. The XFX Thick mostly inflicted this position upon itself, thanks to the excessive 1980s cartoon robot plastic appendages, where our testing and charts showed that the removal of these significantly improves performance. So the XFX Thick gets the Best Worst award. We're looking forward to the XFX Thick 3 to see if it improves anywhere, but we'll see. It's a bit close for them to have made many changes. The Best PCB category will be brief, and we mostly want to point you toward BuildZoid's excellent analysis of the Asus Strix 5700 XT. BuildZoid has done a few 5700 XT analysis videos for us on this channel and more on his own. Actually, Hardcore Overclocking is the channel where you can and should find those, with the overall synopsis being that a lot of the cards are side grades or equivalent to the 5700 XT, but a few really stand out. The Nitro Plus, for example, was a bit of a disappointment, analyzed on our channel for being simply acceptable. But Asus and the Strix establish itself as a contender for PCB and VRM quality in this card category. The board features easy-to-access DMM probe points, I2C options for Elmore Labs external controllers, and a powerful 5-phase VRM, well, a twin 5-phase using Asus terminology with 60 amp power stages and good transient response. The PCB alone won't allow you to overclock higher, especially or primarily on air, as that's mostly dictated by silicon quality. So if you're buying a card, plugging it in, and letting it go, this doesn't matter all that much, but there are other features you might care about. That said, if you really care about PCB quality and VRM efficiency, or if you're doing competitive overclocking with power play table mods or hacks like the Elmore controllers you can get, then this is a strong point of consideration, the Strix. We'll link BuildZoid's video below and strongly encourage you to check that out if you'd like to learn more about this board and just power design in general. You can learn a lot from him. Let's go through a final price breakdown for some more granularity at each price point. We're basing this off of Amazon and Newegg US pricing at the time of writing. First off, the AMD reference card, in spite of its very many issues with cooling, a lot of issues with cooling, is actually a good PCB and VRM that's easily water cooled. You can spend the least at about $400 and then reallocate the rest of the budget on a water block. If you're looking for a project card, this one is it. There are water blocks springing up for the 5700 XT cards and existing aftermarket solutions like the Arctic series that we hybridized our card with. For an enthusiast who intends to ditch the stock cooling solution, the reference card's a good candidate. We wouldn't recommend it at all in its default blower state to anyone. To be very clear here, at 40 dBA at thermal throttles at 110 degrees junction temperature, which is the point at which the clocks are dialed back. Most of the other PCBs are side grades of this reference model, and so reference makes sense for water cooling or even budget competitive overclocking. You can easily fit an Allen-2 pot to this, although this is where PCB starts to matter, and you could consider a higher end one if you have the money. Next up, in the $400 to $430 category, we'll re-highlight the main options we've reviewed thus far, including the Sapphire Pulse, the Gigabyte Gaming OC, and the MSI Evoke OC. Count us for a hard pass with the Evoke. For the Pulse and the Gaming OC, buy whichever is available and cheaper, or whichever suits your fitment and aesthetic needs. The Sapphire Pulse made good use of separate VRM and memory heat sinks so that more heat isn't soaked by the GPU cooling solution, but airflow can still work its way down into the standalone heat sinks. Gigabyte doesn't use this approach, but still benefits from direct airflow onto the memory plate. Not much separates the two, with the intricacies better defined in our Gaming OC review if you care. For the $430 to $460 category, options widen. The Nitro Plus, OC, and the Red Devil are both exceptionally strong performers that can be considered relatively equally. The Nitro Plus would be more readily prepared with an Allen-2 pot for the small audience that cares, but it also has a tasteful RGB LED implementation for the mainstream users. The Red Devil can be argued as better or minimally equal to some of the Nitro results, depending on which component you're testing. The Gaming X is also in this price range and is simply fine. We don't have any major issues with it, but we also don't have anything to really recommend it for. If nothing else is available, it's okay. We haven't yet tested the Asus card, and probably won't unless there's a strong reason to, but its PCB and VRM are among the most promising for this grouping. Note that PCB quality, again, doesn't mean much unless you're really stressing the card. So this would be a good competitive overclocking candidate, or just for someone who's an enthusiast of high-end PCBs. So that's everything for the 5700 XTs for now. There are more cards out there. For example, ASRock's got a Challenger, I think it's called, and the Asus Strix we don't have yet, but interest is dying down on these cards, and there's obviously a business aspect to this too. I can't keep buying these and justifying the purchase because we'll lose money on them at this point. They're not getting enough views to justify it. But if there's a card that you are extremely interested in and the community's in agreement on it, we can probably justify picking up a few more. We're a bit oversaturated on 5700 XT content, but with almost 10 or so that we've worked with, you have a really good spread of each company in here to kind of pick between them, and then you can step down from the Halo products if you want to buy one of their other ones. But we have a very well-defined grouping from $400 up to $470 or so to help pick in the price points along the way. Everything else, it's more filler. So this selection should pretty much cover you. And if you see a major one come out that's really interesting for some reason, let us know. If everyone wants to see it, we'll go pick it up and do something with it. But that'll be it for now. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net to help us directly with this type of content, because we did have to buy a couple of these. And when you're looking at the same base GPU over and over, obviously there's only so much people care about the cooling solution. So if you want to support us for more of these, then go to the store, pick something up, or patreon.com/gamersnexus. Thank you for watching. We'll see you all next time.